Hello, everyone. Welcome to another Asia and Pacific shows. In this episode today, we are going to talk about Taiwan. I had the pleasure to joining by Julian Oilet. In this conversation, we will discuss the internal affairs of the Taiwan and the geopolitics, as I said, in and around the Taiwan, because there is a Chinese military blockade also around the island. We will try to cover all these developments in this region. By the way, welcome, Julian. Thank you for joining me today.
Thank you for having me.
Okay, let me first introduce you to my audiences. Julian Olliott is an investigative journalist with a long and international career. He researched, hosts, and produced two programs for Radio Taiwan International. Taiwan, as the world talks about international relations with Taiwan at the center and the voice of the South Taiwan. He gives an out of the Taipei perspective and a highly diverse country. Julian was a long-time collaborator of the Belgian public broadcaster RTBF and the Australian public broadcaster SBS, where he primarily covered news about Taiwan and China, both in radio and in television. He has directed three documentaries for Taiwan Plus and for RTBF. He has also worked extensively in Lithuania and in Democratic Republic of Congo in the war-torn Kivu region. The radio programs he produced in Australia have been nominated for international awards. In written press, he has published articles in the Sydney Morning Herald, The Interpreter, Rabbit Hole, La Libre Belgium, the Brussels Times, and others. He also published four non-fiction books. Oh, by the way, congratulations, Julian. You have already book published for non-fiction books. That's great.
Yes, thank you.
Julian, I think we are taking benefits that you are residing in the Taiwan. This is a great opportunity for us. Yeah, you are directly in the country living, and you are, I think, one of the best aware of the situation, both as a journalist and as a living in the country. The Taiwan elected a new president, and now they have new administration. How these new administrations affect the political landscape of the country? Can you provide a little bit an overview about the new administration and their key policies? What will be new or for at least for countries' domestic affairs and international affairs?
Well, as you said, I'm a journalist, which means that primarily I am a witness. So I have, of course, no pretension, no academic pretensions to be able to foresee anything that's going to happen or to provide analysis. But I see a lot of things, I observe a lot of things, and I can talk, of course, about what I observe. The new president, Ching-te, is a very well-known figure in Taiwan. He is somebody who has a long and visible career already, so the Taiwanese people know exactly who he is. He was the vice president during the previous presidency for the last 4 years, and before that he was also the prime minister. So he is very well known to the Taiwanese public, who know exactly what kind of personality they brought to power. Now, when it comes to politics, what do we know what he is going to do? Well, Mr. Lai himself and his party, the Minjindang, the Democratic Progressive Party, kind of tries to frame the presidency to come as a continuity of the presidency that is finishing now. So for 8 years, the same party was in power with the presidency of Mrs. Ing-wen. And what I witness is a lot of efforts by the Minjindang party to kind of try to present Mr. Lai as a continuity. Pretty much, they want us to think what you had for 8 years, you're still going to have it. What can we add to this? Well, first, when it comes to geopolitics and security, there is a need to reassure the rest of the world that Mr. Lai is not going to overstep anything that Mrs. Tsai has been doing, because earlier in his career, up until he became vice president 4 years ago, pretty much, Mr. Lai was perceived as a much more radical in his defense of the independence of Taiwan than Mrs. Tsai was. Now, we know, of course, that the Minjindang is the party who has the strongest position in favor of Taiwanese independence and refutal of Chinese claims. But it doesn't mean that it has a unified and radical position. There are different trends in this. The Minjindang is for Taiwanese independence as far as, well, in front of them, the Kuomintang, the other party, still officially is for eventually, one way or another, the union with China. But that doesn't mean that everybody in the Minjindang has the same idea. Mrs. Tsai, during her presidency, made it clear that the way she solved the conundrum is to say we are already independent, we just happen to be called Republic of China and have inherited these institutions and symbols, but we are already a country, an independent country. In fact, Mr. Lai, for most of his career, had the reputation of being associated with much more radical ideas that consist of saying it's not enough to just have inherited this Republic of China thing that is now an independent Taiwan. We should push further by declaring a full independence from our own Republic of China to make it a new Taiwanese country. He had the reputation of being associated with this trend. Of course, the biggest difference is that this trend does not have the support of the United States or most of the international community that is officiously, at least, on the side of Taiwan, because it is seen as, how to say, a bit too provocative towards China. The essential supports of Taiwan, the United States first and foremost, because they are the most likely to defend, but also other Asian countries like South Korea, Japan, Philippines, and to a lesser extent Europe, etc. All of them clearly are on the side of letting Taiwan be independent as it is today. But they are wary of this kind of somewhat symbolic big declarations, such as saying we declare independence now, because they think this will provoke a war that they do not want to happen. They would like it to just stay as it is until the solution is solved somehow, someday. To make it clear, the United States will defend Taiwan if China attacks, but it will not defend Taiwan if Taiwan causes an attack by declaring independence. So Mrs. Tsai found some sort of elegant solution of saying, well, I don't need to declare independence, we already are. So for a while there was the question, is Mr. Lai going to be the same? Well, he has spent the 4 years of his vice presidency framing himself as the successor of Mrs. Tsai. And to do that, he softened his tone. He clearly softened his tone to reassure not only Taiwan's international support, but also the Taiwanese themselves, because it's extremely rare to find a Taiwanese who think that Taiwan should be a part of China. But the truth is, most people just like it as it is and do not want to make too much waves, not because they don't want a fully independent country, but because they want an independent country, but they don't necessarily want to die. You see, it's as simple as that. So Mr. Lai also reassured a lot of electors by defining himself, he says, as a pragmatic worker for Taiwanese independence. This is his own elegant way of saying, I haven't betrayed my ideals. I still think Taiwan should never be a part of China, but I'm not going to be any sort of buckaroo who puts us in danger with everybody by speaking a bit too much and making a bit too rash decision. This is what we can say about Mr. Lai for international affairs. Please go ahead, tell me.
Julian, just you mentioned so many important points. Mr. Lai was vice president and well aware to the president, former President Tsai's the governance style. But still, this transition from President Tsai to new administration, do you believe that we'll have any problem or in terms or implication in terms of the internal affairs and in terms of the international sport? Just I think we can give an example. The former president of Japan, President Abe, Prime Minister Abe. After he died, I think that the stability within the Japan is not succeed as the President Abe did. Do you think that there will be any instability, or in terms of international sport, will there be any change in terms of the China and Taiwan relations? Given his radical approach, will make anything difficult in this transition process from former President Tsai to
so far, he actually has remained true to what he was preparing for the last few years. He is really in the continuity of Mrs. Tsai. So the rest depends on China also, and we know that pretty much China has reached a stage where the sole mention of Taiwan as a word immediately has them jumping to the ceiling. So in a way, there is little that Mr. Lai or any other potential president can do, because pretty much China, in terms of rhetoric, has reached such a level of hysteria and insanity that they can't say, like, there's nothing that the Taiwanese president can say that is not going to trigger some sort of hysterical answer by China. So we don't see him for the moment changing anything in this term. What will be different, though, and you are to mention it, is the domestic politics. Because first and foremost, well, Mrs. Tsai was widely praised for her presidency. She's got the highest rating of any former president in Taiwan when leaving office, even higher, I think, than Lee Tong-hui, which is quite an achievement. But it is absolutely certain that a large portion of the Taiwanese population is disappointed by the domestic result. Not that the economy is bad, it is actually not so bad. And there is also a certain trend of pessimism among Taiwanese in terms of economy, but that's a society question. The truth is that there is especially a big problem when it comes to finding a house for younger people, especially in the north of the country. So there's also problems with energy. There's a lot of questions around the policy of energy. It's too expensive, etc. So there's the moment when we need to remember that, well, Taiwan is just like any other country. It also has its own domestic policies and its own problems of bread and butter, like any other country where the citizens need to find a job and not pay too much for their living. And most of the time, I mean, like 4 years ago when Mrs. Tsai was re-elected, at first, actually, we were thinking probably it's possible that she lose just because of domestic policies, because the Taiwanese people want to have a better situation, economically speaking, and maybe the Kuomintang would provide. And then pretty much China handled the second Tsai presidency to Mrs. Tsai on a silver plate by destroying Hong Kong, which scared the hell out of the Taiwanese. And from that moment on, there was no way anything else but someone who is attached clearly to Taiwanese independence was going to be elected. But this time it's different because these economical issues are becoming more precise. Like I say, 4 years ago, it was more, like I would see Taiwanese people being a bit like grumpy, saying, oh, I wish I paid less taxes. I wish the government gave me more things. I wish my rent were lower, and I wish I earned a bit more money. But at the end of the day, in any country, everybody says that all the time. Everybody's a bit grumpy with this, Here now we see it being very like having precise policies attached to it. The rent is simply too high in Taipei. Plain and simple, period. I don't live in Taipei myself. I live in the south of the island, but I know very well how it is in Taipei. The energy is a problem. period. Like we know there are precise points in domestic policy that absolutely needs to be addressed. And the third party that managed to make a significant score, and the candidate of Mr. Ing-wen was mostly successful because of this. They made a good success. They entered some representatives in the Legislative Yuan, which is the parliament here. Because of this, they were pretty much framed as the party for people who care first and foremost about not having your bank account empty and making a living for yourself. In a way, Mr. Ing-wen could have even been more successful than that at this presidency, but shot himself in the foot when he refused to clarify his position on China, which was pretty much, I mean, I don't want to be too harsh to him, but if you want the job of president of Taiwan, you're going to have to say clearly what you want to do about China. You can't really be evasive about that, and that costed him still a lot of votes. But the way that Mr. Lai was elected with 40% of the votes is sometimes framed by people as saying, 60% voted for China. No, that's not true. Absolutely not true. It means 60% of the electorate was more ready to vote for domestic issues, regardless of geopolitics, which means that these domestic issues are becoming very pressing. So how is Mr. Lai going to tackle that? We don't know yet, but that's what we're going to need to keep an eye on.
Julian, between these difficulties, because the government also, I think, in Taiwan, to be a government is not easy a business. On the one hand, you will defend independence, and on the one hand, you will have economic relations with China. Also, you will facing a threat from China. So, what in this situation, I would like to touch upon the economic policies. What economic strategy is the new administration can implement to boost Taiwan's economy and the other public concern, like the higher rate of the renting and other things?
I would make the distinction between two important domestic policy, one about the rent and the other about the rest of the economy. To a certain extent, I mean, I do not really want to comment on what they're going to do because I don't really know, but we know that there is an awful lot of money that is going back to Taiwan from mainland China, because everybody has enough of making business there because it has become too dangerous. So they are bringing back their money out of China and into Taiwan. We see that happening a lot. I see it happening a lot around. Another strategy, well, you see, that will probably be different. Actually, we can expect this to be different with Mr. Lai, but Mrs. Tsai was seeking new markets for Taiwanese economy in the South strategy towards the Southeast Asia. It is possible that the Lai administration will try to broaden that. I have observed since the beginning, 4 years ago, the building up of the relationship between Taiwan and Lithuania, which I knew from the start was an extremely important thing, because Lithuania is a very small and unknown country, but I know it personally intimately well. It is extremely close to Taiwan in terms of history and sociology, and its attachment to defending democracy and resisting to a giant country next door. But also, Lithuania has developed a fantastic ecosystem, economically speaking, in terms of allying technology and business, becoming the leaders in Europe in fintech, having an extremely advanced laser industry, which works very well with the semiconductor industry in Taiwan. So the development of the ties between the two countries was also Taiwan entering Europe by this little secret door that is Lithuania. And I was just talking just a few days ago with the heads of the Chamber of Commerce in Lithuania, the head of the Taiwanese Chamber of Commerce in Lithuania. And he was saying exactly this. You have to see Lithuania as not a country of not even 3 million people. You have to see it as your entrance door to Europe, because it's a EU country, it's a NATO country, etc. And I believe that now that this relationship is established, it is entirely possible that Taiwan tries to push a bit more in Europe, also because what has changed in the last 2 years is the war in Ukraine, putting back the focus on Europe and changing a lot of things in Europe and making Europe much more important than it was before. I have also observed, since I am originally European, that the question of Taiwan is appearing much more now in Europe, when for a long time Taiwan was seen as an extremely faraway problem that was not necessarily any business for Europeans. It was just very far away. The Americans were taking care of that, whatever. And suddenly, again, because China handled the success to Taiwan on a silver plate by pretty much wiping its feet on the face of Europeans. So now Europeans are angry at China and turning their back to it and towards Taiwan. So it is possible that Taiwan will try to broaden this but again, that doesn't depend entirely on Taiwan. It's also the world that is seeing this realignment of democracies together. So this is something that we can anticipate, not only geopolitically, but also economically speaking, in order to find more markets, in order to find more money. It's as simple as that, because Taiwan is also a country of manufacture, of exports, and so it needs exports and it needs markets.
Julian, you say that many Taiwanese business people take their money from mainland China and bring to the Taiwan. Given this situation, can we interpret this in the future? It will be more tense relations between China and Taiwan, and also Taiwan will develop new strategies toward the southbound strategies, like, or in terms of the economic relations with China, will increase its economic relations, trade relations with China, with Japan, with other Southeast Asian countries, and with the United States, and ultimately we will see the deterioration of the cross-strait relations.
Well, to be honest, I don't think how they could deteriorate any more than that. And often it's almost a cliche in articles to say the worsening situation in the Straits. Say, does it keep worsening, or like it goes down and down and down? Where is the bottom of this? I mean, it cannot go any worse than that. And at the end of the day, it's entirely China doing it. I mean, like I said, they have reached a stage in which they are ready to tolerate absolutely nothing whatsoever, and to distort any fact into their own narrative to a wide extent. What I see, I mean, these exercises around Taiwan, well, they're not a blockade, because you can actually go in and out of Taiwan, no problem. I mean, just 3 days ago, when these military maneuvers were starting, I was talking with someone telling me her husband has a boat, he's going to go out for sailing. So, like nobody is afraid of these warships. Barely anyone mentions it here. It's actually not very... there's no panic, there's no fear about that, because they happen a lot. First of all, because they happen a lot, because China has taken a pattern of immediately putting its boats out for every reason. So, okay, all right, they're doing it again. Because then a lot of foreign pundits are going to scrutinize how many boats exactly. Is it more, is it less? If they're paid for that, good for them. But at the end of the day, the fact remains, and Taiwanese people are pretty literate about that if someday there is an invasion, we're going to go to see it months in advance, because it's impossible to prepare for such an amphibious operation without it being seen months in advance. Another thing also that the Taiwanese are very well aware of is just how strong the island is. And I often say this, if it was so easy to take Taiwan, well, China would have done it a long time ago already. So it is not easy. It is absolutely not easy.
So,
it is even less easy today.
How is really the implication of this blockade on the social situation inside Taiwan or other part of the city? Is there any serious effects on the people, or people already became familiar with this blockade and the military drills?
Yeah. But again, it's not a blockade. And be careful, because the traffic is not blocked. It's exercises around the island, and yeah, pretty much here. Everybody has become immune to it. The truth is that there's already a war, but it's not a war fought with military. It's an information. China is putting this big navy around to push their narrative that they are very strong, that everybody should be afraid, that everybody should surrender. So it's a battle of it's a battle in the war of information, and this precise battle here is being lost in Taiwan, because they are not really intimidating the population. They are not really influencing the population. Everybody here is talking about the protests against the reform of the parliament, and there's much more than about how many planes exactly are circling the island. Not even very close, actually. You're never going to see anything from here. Are they, however, winning this battle of information for the rest of the world? Well, yes, potentially, precisely because it is being amplified in an echo chamber of a lot of international media and social network also, who wants to ask the question, is there going to be a war? Which is a question that should not be asked, because it's just maneuvers. And I mean, why should we be that afraid that they are putting their boats around the island? If there is one thing that Ukraine really succeeded at, is absolutely obliterating the Russian Navy in the Black Sea, using missiles and drones that cost only a tiny fraction of the cost of a boat. And I mean, Taiwan has the same sort of toys, so at the end of the day, if they really want to put their boats around and try to approach the coasts, well, remember the Moskva, who was sunk in the beginning of the Ukrainian war. Well, you're going to have a collection of Chinese Moskvas somewhere deep into the strait. So it's not really something that that people worry about. The biggest danger is the war of information, the influence on the elections, and the influence also on international allies, trying to lure them away by telling them that there is no point supporting Taiwan, or that it is not in their interest in supporting Taiwan, so that they would give it up until the island is isolated and simply surrenders. And by surrendering, I mean electing somebody who would be clearly handling Taiwan to Beijing. This is much more dangerous. And I believe these exercises here around, I believe, I know it is, because we saw it before, these exercises are part of this war of information. It's intimidated everybody. It is, I worked in newsrooms. You have to know something. In newsrooms, in a television channel, you have a few hours to make a story, and what you want is images to put on the TV news, and the images you receive are those given by the Chinese military of their planes and their boats going around. They probably come from CCTV, the state channel, because Associated Press actually distributes the images of CCTV to newsroom. This is something that should be said. And so playing on the fact that journalists in the daily news are just normal people trying to do a decent job, and doing it in the limits of the material they have available and the time they have available. Well, if they are they are assigned this story and have to illustrate what's going on, they're going to use the images available to them, which are actually pretty scary, because it's big boats floating around. But
Julian,
at the end of the day,
I
they're
interrupt
just
you
going
actually
around.
here. There is another party. United States also another party of this the situation between China and the US, and there is another situation also in the South China Sea between the China and the Philippines. There is yes, maybe there is no more concern and the war situation, but still. Doesn't we have any the concern of the miscalculation, especially between the US and China?
They're personally the same. I don't believe in miscalculations, because I actually wrote a paper about that a few years ago. I do not believe in accidental war. Wars don't happen by accident. We all want to remember the day that Gavrilo Princip killed someone in Serbia, and that triggered World War One. But I say, take a step back here. World War One happened because everybody wanted it. If it hadn't been this assassination, it would have been another event the month after. So it's not really an accident. It's everybody just wanted it, because you can take plenty of counterexamples. I remember listing the counterexamples just a few years ago. At some point, you had, like the United States killed an Iranian general, and everybody was screaming and etc. And at the end of the day, there was no war. I mean, what's not a casus belli if not a general being killed? But in the end, neither the US nor Iran wanted to have a war at that precise moment. I took another example at some point during the operations in Syria during the civil war. One of the, I think it was a Russian fighter jet that was downed by Turkey, more or less by mistake, and so that was a big scandal. They were delaying their project to make a pipeline together, blah 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 blah, and we thought, oh my God, is there going to be a war across the Black Sea in the Bosphorus, etc.? Well, no, they just waited 3 months, and after that, when everybody had forgotten, they just resumed business as usual because they did not want a war. So at the end of the day, if someday we hear that there is a war between the United States and China because some guy got a bit closer and touched his shoulder or whatever, it's not going to really be an accident. It's just the moment when they wanted to have a war, and whatever pretext was going to be good. So I do not really worry about miscalculation, because I think even if it looks like a miscalculation, I'm pretty certain it's not.
Because especially the report from the United States, from the DoD, or from Pentagon, many times indicate that or believe that the China has a plan to invade Taiwan in 2049 or 2029 or 20. They give some exact dates. Always they promote this concern.
Mm-hmm.
How do you look at this situation?
Well, the way I look at that is that, remember, the United States is not Taiwan. I even say that to Taiwanese sometimes, but they are very aware of it themselves. The United States is not Taiwan, and they do not really have 100% of the interest of Taiwanese at heart. They are just an ally. And when you have an ally, and such a powerful and useful ally, because it's undeniable, you got the most powerful country in the world having your back, of course you want to keep them. Why wouldn't you? But you have to navigate that. And they are actually, the successive administrations in Taiwan have been pretty agile and clever in the way they manage their relationship with the US, keeping them close because they're useful, but keeping in mind that the United States also have their own agenda. And it just happens that Taiwan is lucky that they are part of the interests that United States have, but it doesn't mean that the United States want the Taiwanese to be happy and have everything they want. So the United States are also in this war of information pushing their own narrative, and their own narrative is that everybody should be panicking because China will start a war. And of course, again, it is amplified by every second media who is very hungry for that. But I am actually completely in opposition to repeating this kind of narrative, and I do my work without ever repeating it, because it is sometimes, quite frankly, ridiculous. Nobody knows when the war will happen. When I hear once more some guy says that the war could happen this day, there are medias that really jump on that and repeat it all the time. Every day I see an article with some guy who's got a PhD from here or experience in that intelligence agency years ago, and he says that as an expert, war could happen on exactly the 21st of February 2027 at 9 p.m. And this is absurd, like even Xi Jinping himself probably doesn't know that precisely when he wants a war or if he wants a war. So that's all of this is made to push the narrative, and all these articles, all these analyses, 2 cents by a very, very qualified experts are always, I remember recently I counted the number of times there was might, would, and could, and may in his post, and it was like, I think like there was one conditional word per 4 words in his sentence, in his text. And this way, like I studied intelligence gathering actually, and that's the way that you protect your career without ever committing to anything. You're right in every possible ways. When you say the war could, may, might, maybe happen, but I'm not sure, well, you are right all the time. And all these people have their own career to build. And like, I mean, I know you have a PhD, please don't take it against yourself, but I never knew there were so many people with a PhD until I got into Taiwan. It's astonishing that every second person now seems to have a doctorate and a thesis that apparently gives them the authority to forego any kind of wisdom and humility and arrive and telling everybody with a very straight face, I know when the war is going to happen. I say, no, you don't know when the war is going to happen. You don't know if the war is going to happen. And all of this, part of it is a narrative pushed by the United States more than Taiwan itself, even though some part of the Minjindang also push this narrative, because it is in their interest to dramatize it, because they believe that it's going to bring more support to Taiwan if they scare everybody. Personally, I think it's the opposite. I think it gives the impression that it's doomed and that you should give up, and I think this narrative should not be pushed, not only because it's counterproductive, but also because it is not verified in facts, and my job is to verify facts, is to talk about facts and talk about the present, not about the future, because I'm a journalist, not an analyst. But the truth is that if I can redeem myself in your eyes, I also talk to a lot of academics who are doing their job seriously because they do researches and they show solutions that they found through researches. But there are a bit too much people who try not even to push a narrative. They're not like part of some sort of grand strategy, but simply making a career, because you can make a very good career. Actually, I would probably be much more wealthy if I decided to go around everywhere and say that as an expert, I believe that the war is going to happen on that date, and start reporting on every second retired military person in the United States who's been speaking somewhere and say, oh, I think it might, maybe, could, may, perhaps, potentially will happen on that day. I'd probably make much more money if I did that, but I don't think this is what should be done.
Yeah, Julian, thank you very much. This important observation is really significant for Taiwan, because you are observing this the situation in the country, and unlike, as you mentioned, academics or the decision makers, even maybe sometimes they only go through the reports and they only get information through the news maybe. But it is important to living in a country and get a primary source and living with the culture, with the society, following the news, and this is also important. And from here, I just would like to jump about another domestic development in Taiwan. What are the main causes of this recent protests in Taiwan, and how is the government responding to this protest, and what steps are being taken to address the concerns of the opposition, or of the government, or of the public? What is the causes and reasons behind this protests?
Well, you're very right to talk about this, because this actually occupies a much more mental space for Taiwanese people right now. So pretty much what happened, like I said, Mr. Lai was elected, but his party, the Minjindang, fell short of the majority at the parliament. The Kuomintang also fell short of a majority, and the party of Mr. Ko Wen-je has just enough seats in the middle to be a kingmaker when it comes to pass legislation. So, of course, what happened is that suddenly the two opposition parties decided that they'd like to vote a law that gives more power to the parliament, because put together they have more power at the parliament. And this immediately triggered protests, probably more than they expected, actually, from not only supporters of Mr. Lai, but simply people who think that you shouldn't toy with the institutions like this. So these protests have been huge, and it's very interesting. For the moment, the President Lai has kind of took the posture of being a bit above the melee, and after all, why would he say anything? Because apparently the street is talking for him, so he doesn't need to add anything if he already has significant support in the street. That's everything a politician could dream of, is to have people protesting in the street to defend you. In general, people go in the street against the president in every country in the world, I mean. So I'm pretty certain that a lot of American presidents would be very happy to have people in the streets supporting them. So this is quite unique when you think about it, that people go and protest to support the president. And it is true. I have observed people here who are not necessarily very politicized, not very I mean, like the part of the population that is not too much into politics, who gets very piqued by this, who get very nervous at the idea of reforming the parliamentary powers, and are tempted to go and protest, or like start spreading it in social media. What the hell is this? Another thing also, what the way I am observing it, that's a bit more what. Okay, it's an observation I have, so I'll make it. It's a bit the end of an old-fashioned way of doing politics in Taiwan, because when the two opposition parties decided that they wanted to vote that law, it created a brawl in the parliament, with politicians starting even having a fist fight in the parliament. And this is actually not rare. It actually happens since democracy was established in the early 90s. It is not rare to see a brawl in the legislative yuan in the parliament in Taiwan. And what that was explained by Taiwanese people is that they interpret it as politicians trying to put on a show so that everybody can see just how passionate they are about defending their idea. And so that voters would think, oh, wow, such a brave politician. They are even ready to go in a fist fight to defend us. We should totally vote for them. And it seems to be a bit the end of this, because this time what I'm seeing is that it is heavily criticized, and heavily criticized like across party lines. Like no, I don't see anyone here in Taiwan this time being happy that there is a brawl. And just today I saw passing an article in a paper that I quite respect when it comes to Taiwan, who was saying that Taiwanese people have a bit enough of politicians making it all the time a matter of life and death. And this is true, that this is something that is very specific in Taiwan, because there is this constant threat of China jumping at their throat, is that everything becomes a matter of life and death. Like if you live in any country, you live in I don't know, the US, the UK, Germany, Italy, Spain, whatever country, if there is a domestic policy, like I spoke earlier about, well, the rent is too high, the taxes are too high, whatever, you name it, well, there is a public debate about domestic policy. In Taiwan, no, it's immediately a matter of, is this going to put us into the hands of China? Immediately. Everything is always, there is always this thing in the middle, if only because the Kuomintang, the main opposition party, still remains widely and entirely, in theory at least, a party that wants to handle Taiwan to China. So that creates a lot of knee-jerk reaction, a lot of extreme reaction. And immediately here, the idea of reforming the parliament in another country, it would always be a big deal, it would be a big conversation, but in Taiwan, immediately it makes everybody very angry. But there's not only the China question, actually, it's also because the democracy is still young, it's not 35-year-old yet, and people are still very much attached to it. And touching the institution is something that makes them a bit, feeling a bit electric. Yeah, that's really probably, I think the opposition parties did not anticipate the kind of reaction it would trigger into the population. Yeah.
Julian, could a little bit go to the detail? What was the exact problem behind it, the situation in the parliament and the situation of the reform? It is more closely to related to the domestic affairs or international affairs, just for audiences.
It's a bit of both. Like basically, the idea is to give more power to the parliament to sometimes pretty much block what the executive is doing, and it's a bit like it's also a bit like in theory it would be the possibility to question something and pretty much bog down a minister into some sort of endless procedure to prevent something from happening. And they arrived and said, okay, well, here is the bill, let's vote it today, so without any debate, any discussion, etc. The truth is that the question of whether the legislative yuan should be a bit more powerful or not has been debated for quite a while. As a matter of fact, it used to be the Minjindang side who was in favor of more power to the parliament, because in theory at least it's more democracy. But in this case, because there is a cohabitation between like because the president doesn't have the majority at the legislative yuan, it posed the question of, well, what's the point of electing a president if then the parliament can just cancel this election by then stopping him? So this is not going to be easy to solve. And again, I don't want to see the future, but I wouldn't be surprised if it's a debate that drags quite along, actually, because it is also some sort of hot potato that has been passed from one administration to the other. So some also were critical of saying that, well, if you have a parliament that always just obey the president, it's like a rubber stamp parliament, so it's not real democracy, etc. But again, this debate doesn't exist only in Taiwan. Every democracy sometimes have this question about, it's all check and balances in a democracy, and we say who should have more or what is the right balance between having checks and balances and having efficiency, because you can always have like making sure that no one has too much power, but then you also want the people you elect to have enough power to actually do something. So this is again a debate that is as old as Plato, But again, in Taiwan, it immediately takes this color of worrying that maybe then the Kuomintang is going to stop the Minjindang president from defending Taiwan against China, etc. That's also a part of the debate, yes.
During all these internal developments, from the reform to protest, and also the situations taking around Taiwan, like the military developments of China, how do you believe that it will affect on the Taiwanese culture, the society culture? I mean, by culture, I mean the political culture and the independence culture, or the pro-China culture. How will affect in the foreseeable future?
Well, again, I don't want to read the future, but I can see what I witness as an evolution, because precisely I believe not only in Taiwan but everywhere where I worked before also, that it is extremely important to listen to young people. If I believe the young people I talk to, I'm the rare case of someone who doesn't take young people for idiots. But I think young people are very interesting and have a lot to say. And like Maria Montessori was saying, she was saying, children are the adults of tomorrow, they are the children of today. Well, it's the same for young people. We don't have to see them as future adults, but just as who they are today. And the young people of Taiwan are becoming, let's say, for them, that Taiwan is a country is a given, absolutely a given. And yes, and yet it doesn't mean that the Menjindang has an open boulevard with them, because they are the ones who suffer from economic downturn and from high rent. But again, that's something I wanted to say that earlier, I should say it now, that the idea that the rent is too high in Taipei, it's not only in Taiwan, that's everywhere. We see it in, I heard about it in South Korea. I saw it in Europe. I saw it to a monstrous, insane, absurd level in Australia. And it's always young people who suffer from it. Rents are too high in every democracy, and I'm going to openly just throw it that here. I believe the greed and selfishness of landlord is probably the biggest threat to democracy, because it creates entire generations who are so desperate to find a roof over the head that it takes precedent on everything. And when I say the third party here in Taiwan, headed by Ing-wen, became successful towards young people, despite him not being very clear about what he would do to China and flirting with the idea that he would, like I said, like talk to China, it's a bit suspicious for the vast majority of Taiwanese. But because he's the one who appeared at least with as having new solutions to help young people having a more decent life, well, he captured a large part of the vote of young people. When just 4 years ago, young generations were associated with voting for the Minjindang of Mrs. Tsai and Mr. Lai. So we see younger population who is not the generation of the sunflower movement. It's already very old now. They were probably like little kids when it happened. And for them, the independence of Taiwan is a given, and they are much more concerned about, okay, we have an independent Taiwan, but is this a country for me? Is this country doing something for me? Or am I just going to be be working hard to pay the rent of older people? So for these young people, there is a need for hope. And the hope that is to be given to them, if we want also to include them into democracy and into a free Taiwan, is to support their internationalization, ensure that they speak a good English, that they have the confidence to speak English, to speak to the world, to go out and to bring fresh ideas and to bring wealth and to bring prosperity and reforms to this country. The young people of Taiwan are actually extremely intelligent, extremely global, and represent a massive hope. If you want to finish like this, I'll tell you what is my biggest hope for Taiwan. I am meeting again and again, pretty much every 2 or 3 days, I run into at least one Taiwanese person who is maybe between like 30, 40 years old, so the age of being a parent, who tells me that they are highly critical of the educational system in Taiwan, being way too focused on working extremely long hours, studying for exams, going to a cram school, and having no time to be creative and developing yourself as a young person. That makes me extremely positive, because you hear young people saying this, well, of course they would say it, but when you see their parents saying it, that's a different thing. And that means the education here is going to change, will be forced to change to survive, because an increasingly number of parents in Taiwan will be seeking an alternative form of education that makes the young people become more independent and assertive and creative. And this is what will give birth to a generation that will be able to find solution to sustain itself and to save this country.
Julian, I'm going to back to the defense and the security part of the, because Taiwan has a unique geopolitical situation. Geographically, proximity to China is, just 100 kilometer, and the China there is military exercises always going on around the island. Given this, the geopolitical situations and the involvement of the US and the Chinese activities in the South China Sea, how do you see that the new government will strengthen Taiwan's defense and security needs, especially buying new missiles or defense procurement? What will be, and technological, or also in part of the technology is important, or alliances is Taiwan pursuing to enhance its security and to respond to Beijing's threat?
Again, what I have observed, I observed the two trends. One is a higher reliance on cheaper and smaller technology, which is definitely a lesson that comes from Ukraine. Pretty much like the war in Ukraine is not over, and not that the fate of the war in Ukraine is not decided, but it is absolutely clear that Ukraine has shown to the world that small machinery and small drones and small missiles, etc., are extremely powerful against a much larger opponent with much bigger and more expensive means. So this is especially true for Taiwan, which is in a privileged geographical situation, because when you see that the Americans saw the Russian invasion coming and made it very public, and all the Russians had to do was to cross a border. Here again, preparations for an invasion on Taiwan, we would saw it months in advance, considering the enormous logistic involved. And just imagine the number of ships and equipment that could be destroyed just by Taiwanese drones and small missiles before the Chinese can even put one foot of one soldier on the island. That would be an absolute apocalypse. And we see Taiwan, we see Taiwan getting this lesson and procuring a lot of these kind of small equipments. It's not the only thing, it's not panacea, of course, but in terms of defense, Taiwan is not the only country who does that. But in the case, yes, I observe this, that there is an emphasis put on that. The second thing I observe in Taiwan in terms of defense and procurement is a tendency to make it more indigenous. There is this administration, the name escapes me now, but you can find that out. There is like a study center dedicated entirely to Taiwanese indigenous military technology, and it's bearing its fruit now. It's been operating for many years, and sorry, the biggest achievement they had, well, in terms of size at least, was this submarine, this new submarine that they just launched, and they are going to make more of them. But also, they produced their own fighter jet. They're producing their own missiles, which can reach quite deep in China if they want to. Now they're building up their own equipment. So there is a strong tendency to make it indigenous and everywhere around the island also, because again, I'm based on the south of Taiwan. I'm based out of Taipei, which definitely is seminal to understand this country, to be out of Taipei and to get out of the Taipei bubble. You learn much more this way. And even here in South Taiwan, there is I have seen that. I have been introduced to that network of industries who are producing armaments all around the southern part of the island. So there is a strong tendency to make it more indigenous. Make of that what you will. You can reach the conclusions you want, but it is something that I have definitely observed. Taiwan is trying to produce smaller, efficient weapons, and it is trying to produce its weapons in general itself.
Julian, given the geopolitical situation, not only in the region, around the world, the war situation around the world, and like Ukraine and Gaza, what will be key priorities for the new Taiwanese government to look forward or move forward or establish its relations with the world?
Taiwan is very good at establishing official relationships because it's been doing it for an extremely long time. I really, really believe that the biggest battlefield is the information and the narrative warfare. And I am no one to judge what the Taiwanese government is doing or to pretend telling them what they should be doing. But again, I have observed this extreme importance of the narrative battlefield. And let's say, I have observed that the one who is successful in pushing its narrative is the one that in general gets the more freedom to do what it wants. So that's true for a lot of people. That's probably true for Taiwan as well.
So do you believe that Taiwan is successful in promoting the situation around the world, or still need to some way?
There are different trends in Taiwan, different narratives that are being pushed. It's not unified, which maybe actually is not necessarily the most efficient. And there are some forces in Taiwan which are pushing the right narrative, but there are a lot of forces in Taiwan who are pushing the wrong narrative, which is, again, like counting down how many planes are turning around the island today and reporting that yet another very important person made some silly prediction on when the war will happen. And these people are pushing this narrative of an island under siege and extreme danger, not necessarily because, sincerely believing that it is helping Taiwan by calling people for help. But this is actually counterproductive. It despairs, it spreads a lot of despair, and it plays right into China's playbook that as they call it, reunification is inevitable. It's not a reunification, of course, but that's the way they say it. A more important narrative for Taiwan would be, well, a bit what we discussed. It's actually quite a strong place. It can actually stand on its feet. It has plenty of assets, and there is no signs of there is no concrete signs of any invasion planned or even possible. I often tell this story. It's not real, of course, but sometimes I say, I met Xi Jinping and I told him, do you want to hear a joke? And he said, sure. And I said, Taiwan. And he said, I don't get it. And I said, yeah, I know. If you get it. He doesn't get it. See what I mean? So I didn't meet Xi Jinping. That's a joke. But if it were so easy, they would already have taken it. And this is a narrative that probably needs to be pushed to foster Taiwan's freedom.
Julian, just before end our show, I would like to make a last comment and ask last questions. The situation around Taiwan also are not stable. As I mentioned during our conversation, that there is ongoing tensions between the Philippines and China. Also, there is involvement of the Japan and the other like-minded countries of the US military alliance network in the region are reorganized. What will be the situation, the importance of Taiwan in this geopolitical developments? What will be your last comment?
It is clear that for all these other Asian countries, Taiwan is extremely important. They are probably actually much more how to say, sincere in their attachment to Taiwan than the United States would be, because they are directly threatened. If Taiwan falls, pretty much they have no security anymore. So that's definitely something they don't want to see happening. But remember, again, they are not Taiwan. They also have their own agenda, sometimes not even necessarily antagonistic to Taiwan. But for example, like the Philippines have a policy of publishing every incident with China because it works for them. But that's they are in a different situation than Taiwan. So Taiwan doing the same thing, publishing every little incident, is counterproductive for Taiwan. What works for the Philippines doesn't necessarily work for Taiwan, because the situation is entirely different when it comes to Taiwan and the Philippines. As a matter of fact, the Philippines is under much greater danger than Taiwan, because the Philippines genuinely has its territory with the Chinese Navy directly attacking these territories, like when they take their shores, their islands, and put them there and shot at them with water cannons. I mean, they don't do that even in Kinmen and Matsu to the Taiwanese. So the Philippines are actually much more in danger and with much higher tensions with China. So it is useful for the Philippine government to publish all of these incidents. This transparency policy, which has been well documented, works for them because in their situation it is efficient, but it's not necessarily the strategy that Taiwan should adopt, because the situation is different.
Thank you very much, Julian, for your rich observations from the Taiwan and the precise observations also.
Well, thank you. Thank you for giving me the floor, and I hope that was enlightening for your audience.
Yes, it's quite important, because nowadays, not only the region's countries around the world, people are wonder about the situation on Taiwan, especially with the protests and new administration, and plus the China's military exercise around the island. I hope these our shows will be beneficial for the student of international relations, especially.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Lokman, for having me. It was a pleasure.
Okay, thank you very much, Julian. And for our audiences, please subscribe our channel, and don't forget to share the link with your friends and get notification bell for upcoming shows. Have a good day, good night, good morning.